Captain Elias Kane gripped the console as the alarm klaxon screamed, red lights pulsing across the bridge like arterial blood. All hands brace! Incoming fire from the Zorath fleet! Evasive pattern Delta! His voice cut through the chaos, steady despite the deck shuddering under plasma impacts. The colony ship Endurance was no war vessel, just a hulking transport hauling 5,000 souls to New Horizon. But now it was a sitting duck in the void, the aliens' sleek hunters closing in like wolves on a lame herd. Lieutenant Mara Voss, his second-in-command, slammed her fist on the navigation panel, rerouting power from life support to engines. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her cautious nature warring with the fire in her eyes. Shields at 40%, Cap. They're jamming our distress beacon. Another hit like that and we're venting atmosphere. She was the thinker, always plotting 3 steps ahead, but today her plans were unraveling faster than a frayed rope. From the engineering station, Specialist Jax Reed cursed under his breath, his wiry frame hunched over flickering holoscreens. Witty even in doom, he quipped, "Great, aliens with itchy trigger fingers. If I reroute the fusion core, we might get a burst of speed, but it'll cook half the cryopods." Jax was the improviser, hands grease-stained from a lifetime fixing what others broke, his grin defiant against the encroaching dark. The first real strike hit then, a lance of energy shearing through the hull near the aft thrusters. "Alarms!" wailed louder, and Elias felt the ship lurch, gravity flickering as bulkheads groaned. "Status!" he barked, strapping in tighter. Mara's fingers flew across controls. "Lost auxiliary drive. We're down to 60% thrust. Their boarding pods launching, Cap. 2 minutes out." Her voice held no panic, just the cold math of survival. Jack spun in his chair, eyes wide. "Boarding? Those squid-faced bastards want prisoners? Not on my watch." He yanked a lever, bypassing safeties, the console sparking in protest. The Endurance surged forward, engines roaring in defiance, but it was a desperate gamble. Zorath ships danced around them, their formations too precise, too alien. Elias scanned the tactical display, the enemy icons swarming like angry hornets. The Zorath had hit Epsilon Eridani outpost days ago, seizing the planet in a blitz of orbital strikes. Now they were mopping up stragglers like them. "Options, people. We fight or we run. Pick one." "Run's a pipe dream," Mara said, plotting a slingshot around a nearby asteroid. "But if we use the debris field, we might shake the jammers." Jax laughed bitterly, patching a hull breach with emergency foam. "Or we turn this tub into a bomb, ram the lead ship, go out swinging." The decision hung heavy as another volley rocked them, sparks flying from overhead conduits. Elias nodded once, jaw set. "Mara, set the course. Jax, arm the cargo bay charges. We're not handing over this ship without a fight." As the Endurance dove into the asteroid shadows, jagged rocks tumbling past viewports, the first boarding pod latched onto the hull with a metallic screech. Elias drew his sidearm, the weight familiar in his palm. The colonists below deck stirred in their pods, unaware yet of the storm breaking above. But up here on the bridge, 3 humans stood ready, their ingenuity the only weapon against the tide. The pod's hatch began to hiss open, Zorath warriors spilling out in their exosuits, tentacles writhing. Elias fired first, the shot echoing down the corridor. "Hold the line." Mara covered the flank, her rifle barking in controlled bursts. Jax rigged a nearby panel to overload, buying seconds. The fight spilled into the corridors, alien shrieks, mixing with human shouts, the air thick with ozone and blood. One Zorath lunged at Elias, its energy blade humming. He dodged, slamming the butt of his pistol into its visor, cracking the gelatinous eye beneath. It recoiled, and Mara finished it with a headshot. "That's for the outpost," she muttered. But they were outnumbered, the tide pushing back. Jax's voice crackled over comms from engineering. "Cap, they're cutting through the core access. 2 minutes till they blow us all to hell." Elias wiped sweat from his brow, reloading. The cost was mounting. A crewman down, corridors breached. Yet in that press an idea sparked. Human grit, turning desperation to edge. "Jax, vent the outer decks, suck 'em into space," Elias ordered, the words tasting like victory's edge. The specialist didn't hesitate. Alarms blared anew as atmosphere rushed out, pulling Zorath into the void. Their screams cut short, bodies tumbling free. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of failing systems. The Endurance limped onward, scarred but alive, the asteroid field their temporary shield. Elias slumped against the wall, breathing hard. One ship saved, but the fleet loomed. The war had just begun for them. Elias pushed himself up from the bulkhead, the cold metal biting through his uniform. His ribs ached from the earlier blast wave, but there was no time to catalog the hurts. The bridge lay just ahead, its doors sealed against the vacuum that still whispered through the outer hull. "Jax, status on the core breach?" he called into his comm, voice steady despite the rasp in his throat. "Patched for now, Captain," came the reply, laced with that unflappable calm Jax always carried like a shield. "But we're bleeding atmo from decks 7 through 9. Life support's rerouting, but it'll take hours to stabilize." Elias nodded to himself, striding past flickering emergency lights that painted the corridor in stark reds and blues. The Endurance had held barely, but the Zorath boarding party was only a skirmish. Their mothership hung in the void beyond the asteroid belt, a dagger-shaped behemoth scanning for survivors. One wrong move, and they'd be glassed from orbit. He keyed the bridge door, stepping into controlled chaos. Consoles sparked, and 2 crew members, Lena, the wiry engineer with a perpetual grease streak on her cheek, and Marcus, the broad-shouldered navigator whose jokes had kept morale from cratering, huddled over a holographic display. The air hummed with the low whine of straining generators. "Report," Elias said, sliding into the command chair. Its familiar creak grounded him. Lena glanced up, her eyes sharp behind smudged glasses. "Shields at 30%, Captain. Propulsions offline. Debris from the vent took out the secondary thrusters. We're drifting, but the asteroids are masking our signature for now." Marcus tapped the holo, zooming in on the Zorath vessel. "They're not pursuing yet. Probably think we're scrap. But if they ping us..." He trailed off, jaw set. Elias leaned forward, studying the scan. The Zorath ship dwarfed them, its hull etched with those eerie, glowing runes that pulsed like living veins. They'd hit New Horizon fast, seizing the colony in a blitz of plasma fire and zero-G troops. Earth's response fleet was light years out, leaving ships like the Endurance to harry the flanks. One planet lost, but the tally of their losses would climb if humans didn't adapt. "We adapt," Elias muttered, echoing the old creed. "Lena, can we jury-rig the cargo bay emitters into a decoy burst? Make it look like we're breaking apart?" She chewed her lip, fingers flying over a panel. "Possible. It'll drain the reserves, leave us blind for a cycle. But yeah, fake an explosion signature, draw them into the rocks." Jax's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I've got movement on auxiliary sensors. Small craft launching from their bay. Drones, maybe scouts." The holo flickered, confirming it. 3 blips detaching, arrowing toward the belt. Tension coiled in Elias's gut. If those drones pierced the asteroids, they'd spot the Endurance's heat trail in seconds. "Marcus, plot an evasion vector. Shallow thrust only. Keep us tucked in the debris shadow." Elias's mind raced, piecing together scraps of intel from the colony feeds before comms went dark. The Zorath thrived on precision strikes, their tech woven with some biotech that let them predict human maneuvers. But humans? We thrived on the unpredictable. Lena straightened. "Decoy prepped. Firing in 10. The bridge fell quiet save for the ship's groans. Elias watched the drones close in, their paths efficient, unerring. 8. 7. A jolt rocked the deck as the emitters fired, a plume of ionized gas blooming on the holo like a dying star. The drones veered, signatures locking onto the ghost signal. "Suckers," Marcus breathed, a grin cracking his face for the first time since the alert. But Elias's relief soured fast. One drone peeled off, ignoring the bait, its scan beam slicing through the belt like a scalpel. It was homing on them, adapting already. "Evade!" Elias barked. Marcus punched the controls and the Endurance shuddered, thrusters flaring in a desperate spiral. Asteroids loomed in the viewport, jagged silhouettes against the star field. The drone's beam grazed their hull, alarms shrieking as a secondary breach opened on Deck 4. Sparks flew from a console and Lena cursed, diving under to reroute power. Lost containment in hydroponics, Jax reported, voice tight. We're venting oxygen. Crew on that level. Evacuate now. Elias gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles white. Faces flashed in his mind. The green hands tending the algae vats, their laughter a rare bright spot amid rations. 2 down already from the boarding, and now this. The drone closed, weapons hot. Marcus twisted the ship through a narrow gap, grazing rock that screamed against the shields. 20% integrity left. Lena, anything? Elias pressed. Working it. If I can spoof their biolock. Her hands blurred, splicing a jury-rigged probe into the system. Human code, messy and adaptive, clashing against the Zorath's elegant weave. The drone fired, a lance of energy that boiled away a chunk of asteroid instead. They were clear for a heartbeat. Then the hollow lit up. 2 more signatures joining the hunt, the decoy crumbling under their fire. Elias slammed the comm. All hands brace. We're not going down easy. The Endurance plunged deeper into the belt, a wounded predator weaving through the jaws of stone. Behind them the drones pursued, relentless. But the humans aboard burned with a fire no scan could predict. The klaxon wailed as a jagged rock the size of a shuttle clipped the port nacelle, sending vibrations rattling through the deck like a hammer on anvil. Elias gripped the command console, his knuckles white while the ship bucked wildly. Status on those drones? He barked, eyes locked on the tactical display where 3 red blips closed in, weaving through the debris field with predatory grace. Lena's fingers danced across her panel, sweat beading on her forehead under the dim emergency lights. They're adapting. My spoof's holding for the lead one, but the others are syncing scans. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they lock on our exhaust signature. She yanked a cable from the bulkhead, splicing it into her rig with a spark that lit her face in harsh blue. The Zorath tech was flawless, all crystalline efficiency, but human hacks were born of desperation. Ugly, effective, unpredictable. Divert power to evasive thrusters, Elias ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. Beside him, Marco, the burly engineer with grease-streaked arms and a perpetual scowl, punched in the commands. That'll fry the coils if we push it, Marco growled. But he did it anyway, the ship lurching as auxiliary engines flared. The Endurance twisted sharply, scraping past a tumbling boulder that filled the viewport like an onrushing wall. The lead drone fired again, its beam slicing through the void and vaporizing a chunk of ice nearby. Shrapnel peppered the hull, alarms blaring in protest. Hull breach in Cargo Bay 3, sealing it now, Marco reported, slamming a virtual bulkhead shut. But the cost hit hard. Their dwindling oxygen recyclers were in that bay and the seal wouldn't hold forever. Elias felt the weight of it, the air already tasting thinner, sharper. Lena's eyes widened at her screen. Got a window, there's a dense cluster ahead. Electromagnetic interference from the ore veins. If we thread it, we might shake the tail. Her plan was risky, born from scans of the belt's chaotic gravity wells, but it was all they had. Elias nodded, jaw set. Do it. Marco, reinforce the shields forward. The ship dove, engines screaming as it plunged into the ore field. Rocks loomed, massive and unforgiving, the proximity alerts a frantic chorus. One drone followed too closely, its sleek form smashing against a metallic spire in a burst of fire and debris. But the other 2 adjusted seamlessly, their formations tightening like wolves on a scent. Halfway through, the interference hit, static crackling across comms, the hollows flickering. Lena whooped as the blips vanished from the display. We're ghosts. Push hard! For a moment, triumph sparked in the dim bridge, the humans leaning into their seats as the Endurance surged free. Then the sensors cleared and Elias's blood ran cold. The drones weren't gone, they'd flanked, cutting off the exit vector. One unleashed a barrage, the impact shuttering the frame. They're hurting us, Marco spat, rerouting what power he could. The ship groaned, integrity dropping to 15%, and a red light pulsed, main drive failing. Elias slammed the alert override. All hands reroute to manual overrides. We're not prey, we fight. The words hung in the air, defiant as the belt's shadow swallowed them whole. Lena's hands flew across the auxiliary console, sweat beading on her forehead as she patched into the failing drive systems. The bridge lights flickered like a dying heartbeat. casting jagged shadows over Elias's clenched jaw. He gripped the armrests, eyes locked on the tactical display where the alien drones swarmed like metallic hornets, their vectors tightening the noose. Power reroute complete. Marco grunted from engineering's feed, his voice tinny through the static. But it's a band-aid. Drives at 20%. Another hit and we're debris. Elias nodded sharply, his mind racing through the asteroid belt's chaotic maze. The Zorath had pushed them here, into this graveyard of shattered rock and forgotten probes. But the humans knew improvisation. Lena, scan for dense clusters. We need cover, not open space. She tapped furiously, the hollows stabilizing just enough to reveal a massive fragment tumbling end over end, a relic from some ancient mining op, its surface pocked with craters. There, Captain. 2 clicks starboard, but it's spinning fast. Threading the needle won't be easy. The ship lurched as another drone fired, the proximity alarm wailing. Elias yanked the yoke, the Endurance banking hard into the void. Alarms blared, hull breach in Cargo Bay 3, but he shoved the thought aside. Helm full burn. Marco, seal that breach and give me thrusters. Aye, Marco replied, the clank of tools echoing faintly. Down in the bowels he welded emergency plates over the gash, sparks illuminating his grease-streaked face. The air grew thick with ozone, recyclers straining against the smoke. He wasn't a fighter by trade, just a mechanic who'd signed on for the frontier pay, but grit filled the gaps. One more plate and they'd hold. On the bridge, Lena braced against the G-forces, her cautious nature warring with the adrenaline. She'd always been the planner, mapping routes before jumps, but this was raw survival. Drones adjusting, 3 on intercept. Impact in 30 seconds. Elias's lips thinned. Evasive pattern delta. Use the spin to slingshot us in. He punched the command, the ship groaning as inertial dampers fought the turn. The asteroid loomed, a gray behemoth blotting the stars, its rotation whipping dust trails like a cosmic whip. The first drone closed, its energy lance grazing the shields. Sparks erupted across the viewport and Lena yelped, ducking instinctively. Shields at 60. We can't take another. Fire countermeasures, Elias ordered, his voice steady steel. Lena triggered the chaff launchers, crude human tech, decoys laced with EMP bursts. The drones veered, 2 exploding in silent fireballs, but the third adapted, its alien AI shrugging off the pulse. Marco's voice cut in, urgent. Captain, drive's overheating. If we push into that rock field, we might not pull out. Elias glanced at the display. The Zorath signatures multiplying, reinforcements vectoring in. No choice, we adapt or die. Lena, plot the tightest path through the cluster. Marco, vent excess heat through the bays, buy us time. She plotted, fingers trembling slightly, the lines weaving a deadly ballet between tumbling boulders. The ship dove, the asteroid's shadow engulfing them. Debris pinged off the hull like hail, each impact a reminder of the fragility. Elias felt the weight of it all. The crew's lives, the mission to reclaim Epsilon 7 from the Zorath's grip. One planet lost, but humanity's fire wouldn't flicker out here. A jolt rocked them as the drone matched their course, firing wildly. The bridge console shattered in a spray of glass, shards nicking Lena's arm. She hissed, blood welling, but kept plotting. Almost through, hold on. Marco in the engine room slammed the vent controls. Superheated plasma billowed out, a makeshift flare that lit the belt like a sun. The drone's sensors overloaded, veering into a collision with a fist-sized rock. It detonated in a bloom of wreckage, buying them seconds. The Endurance burst from the cluster's edge, scarred but whole, the remaining drones falling behind in the debris haze. Elias exhaled, the tension coiling tight in his chest. Integrity at 12%, drive limping, but they were free, for now. Lena wiped blood from her cheek, meeting his gaze. That was too close. What's our next move? He straightened, the stars steadying ahead. We hit their relay station, turned the herd on its shepherd. Elias gripped the console as the Endurance shuddered through the void, the makeshift repairs humming uneasily beneath his fingers. Lena patched in from the medbay, her voice crackling over the intercom. Hull's holding, but we're leaking atmosphere in Sector 3. Seal it before we vent the whole ship. Copy that, he replied, fingers flying across the controls. The relay station loomed on the view screen now, a spindly lattice of alien alloy orbiting a gas giant's pale ring, its beacons pulsing like watchful eyes. Drones swarmed its perimeter, thinner here than in the belt, but enough to turn their gamble into a suicide run if they misstepped. Marco's face appeared in the split screen, sweat-streaked and grim from the engine room. Drives are at 60%. We push harder, we might not pull out. Your call, Cap. Elias scanned the readouts, the station's defenses mapping out in holographic overlays, energy shields flickering at key nodes, automated turrets tracking phantom signatures. The plan was simple. Slip in under the ring's interference, overload a power conduit with a targeted EMP burst from their scavenged gear, and watch the drones go feral without their leash. But simple didn't mean safe. One wrong vector and they'd be scrap. All right, Elias said, voice steady despite the knot in his gut. We ghost in low, use the debris field for cover. Lena, rig the probe for the EMP, make it count. Marco prepped the plasma vents as backup. We hit fast, we hit quiet. The ship dipped into the ring's shadow, icy particles rattling against the hull like distant hail. Elias felt the pull of the gas giant's gravity, a relentless tug that made the controls fight back. Alarms chirped softly, proximity alert. A lone drone peeled off from the station, sensors sweeping their trajectory. Got company, Lena warned, her breath sharp. It's probing the edge. If it pings us. Elias adjusted course, nudging the Endurance behind a tumbling chunk of frozen methane. The drone hovered, its scan beam cutting through the haze inches from their hiding spot. His heart hammered, but he kept the ship still, a predator in wait. Seconds stretched. Then the drone veered away, lured by a false echo from their decoy buoy. Elias exhaled, throttling up. Clear. Closing in. They skimmed the ring's outer layer, the station growing larger, its arms bristling with sensor arrays. Lena's probe launched with a faint whoosh streaking toward the primary conduit. Elias watched its path, willing it forward. Impact. A blue flash rippled across the station's shields, the EMP pulse blooming like a silent thunderclap. Drones twitched in response, their formations fracturing as commands garbled. But the station didn't go dark. Auxiliary lights flared and fresh swarms launched, reinforcements angrier and faster. Partial hit, Marco growled. Shields are adapting. We need to get closer. Elias cursed under his breath, the ship bucking as turrets acquired lock. Evasive. Lena, status. Her reply came terse. Probe's fried, but it weakened the core. One more shot could do it. If we don't get vaporized first. A beam grazed their flank, shearing off a sensor array in a spray of sparks. The Endurance spun, Elias wrestling the yoke as alarms wailed. They were exposed now, the rings no longer cover enough. Marco's voice cut in. Vents ready. Say the word and I'll light 'em up, buy you an opening. Do it, Elias ordered. The ship surged forward, plasma erupting from the sides in a blazing curtain. Drones scattered, blinded momentarily, but the station's turrets adjusted, zeroing in. Lena patched through a schematic. There's a blind spot at the base arm, thread the needle there. Elias nodded to himself, plotting the vector. The Endurance dove weaving through fire, the hull groaning under the strain. One turret clipped them, alarm screaming hull breach. They broke through, the probe's launcher arm extending. Firing, Lena said. The second pulse hit true, the conduit erupting in a cascade of failing systems. The station's lights dimmed, drones spiraling into chaos, turning on each other in the sudden command vacuum. But victory came at a price. Elias felt the shipless drive core warning redlining. We're hit bad. Marco, damage report. Engines toast. We're drifting toward the rings. Elias steadied his gaze on the unraveling swarm outside. The herd was loose now, shepherd slain, but they had to survive the stampede. Elias gripped the console as the Endurance shuddered, the viewport filling with the glittering chaos of Saturn's rings. Shards of ice and rock loomed like jagged teeth closing in fast. Lena, get us thrusters on manual override. Marco, seal off the engine bay. Don't let that fire spread. Lena's fingers flew across her panel, sweat beading on her forehead. Override engaged, but the core's venting plasma. We've got maybe 10 minutes before she tears herself apart. Her voice stayed level, the cautious edge sharpening into focus. She was the planner, always 3 steps ahead, but now every step felt like a gamble. Marco patched through from engineering, his breath ragged over the comm. Bay sealed, but it's bad, Cap. Fuel lines ruptured, I'm rerouting what I can. But we're bleeding momentum. He was the brute force of the crew, broad-shouldered and unflinching. The one who'd punch a drone if words failed. A grunt followed his words, metal screeching as he wrestled a bulkhead into place. The ship lurched, a massive ice boulder scraping the hull with a sound like grinding bones. Alarms wailed, red lights pulsing across the bridge. Elias scanned the readouts. The alien station they'd crippled hung in the distance, its drone swarm fracturing into wild packs. But those packs were veering toward them now. Opportunistic hunters scenting blood. They're coming. Lena plot a slingshot path through the rings, used the debris for cover. She nodded, eyes narrowing at the holographic display. Tight window. If we misjudge, we're paced. The rings whipped by, a blizzard of frozen particles battering the shields. Elias felt the vibration in his teeth, the ship protesting every twist. Got a vector, Lena said. But it'll cost us the last of the auxiliary power. She punched it in and the Endurance surged, engines coughing blue fire. They dove into the densest band, drones trailing like angry wasps. One clipped the wing, sparks erupting, but Marco's voice cut through. Shields holding at 20%. I can patch the breach if you buy me time. Elias unstrapped, grabbing a toolkit from the wall. I'm going with you. Lena, keep us dancing. He clapped her shoulder, brief, reassuring, then bolted for the access tube, Marco already hauling him down the corridor. The ship bucked, gravity fluctuating as they crawled toward the engine bay. Heat blasted from a seam in the bulkhead, acrid smoke stinging their eyes. Here, Marco said, pointing to a sparking conduit. Main power relays fried. If we bypass it manually, we might stabilize. Elias wedged the toolkit open, his hands steady despite the tremor in the deck. He was the steady one, the captain who turned grit into glue, holding them together when the stars conspired against them. A drone slammed into the hull nearby, the impact jolting them. They're closing! Lena's warning crackled over the intercom. Elias threaded wires with pliers, sweat dripping onto the hot metal. Almost good there. The bypass clicked, power humming back to life. But the ship spun wildly. A rogue ice chunk had sheared off a stabilizer fin. Marco braced against the wall, yelling, Cap, we're listing starboard straight into the swarm. Elias sealed the panel and hit the comm. Lena, evasive. Fire what we've got left. From the bridge, Lena wrestled the controls, the Endurance pirouetting through the maelstrom. She loosed a barrage from the remaining turrets, shredding 2 drones into glittering debris. The rest scattered, confused by the sudden burst, buying them a breath. Elias and Marco staggered back to the bridge, faces smeared with grime. The rings thinned ahead, open space beckoning, but the readouts painted a grim picture. Structural integrity at 60%, life support straining. We made it through, Elias said, sinking into his chair. But those drones won't forget us, and the station's not done yet. Marco wiped his brow, a rare grin cracking his soot-streaked face. 1 planet down. What's next, Cap? Lena glanced back, her eyes fierce. We adapt. Like always. The Endurance limped forward, rings fading in the rear sensors, but the alien signatures multiplied on the long-range scan, 10,000 strong and closing. Elias gripped the armrests, the hum of the Endurance's engines a ragged whisper against the encroaching silence of space. The long-range scan flickered, alien signatures blooming like a swarm of angry hornets. 10,000 vessels, their formations tightening around the system's edge. Helm, plot a course for the outer asteroid belt, he ordered, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. We need cover before they pin us. Marco nodded, fingers flying over the console, rerouting power from non-essentials to the thrusters. The ship groaned in response, a deep metallic shudder that vibrated through the deck plates. Lena, stationed at tactical, cross-checked the readings, her jaw set. They're vectoring in fast, Cap. Those aren't scouts, main battle group. If we don't shake them, we're done. The bridge lights dimmed as another surge hit life support, the air growing stale with the tang of recycled oxygen. Elias leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the holographic display. The aliens had seized Epsilon Eridani's primary world months ago, their orbital stations choking the trade lanes, but humanity's ragtag fleet had been hitting back. Guerrilla strikes, supply raids, anything to bleed them dry. 1 planet taken, but the cost endless. Now with the Endurance battered from the ring skirmish, they were the bait in a trap closing fast. Options? Elias asked, glancing between them. No panic in his tone, just the quiet grit that had kept them alive through a dozen jumps. Marco pulled up schematics, the glow illuminating his scarred cheek. We could vent plasma from the auxiliary tanks, fake an engine breach, draw them in close, then flip and hit them with the railguns. He paused, rubbing his chin. Risky. If it backfires, we're sitting ducks. Lena shook her head, her fingers tracing enemy trajectories. Too slow. They're adaptive. Saw it in the drone logs. Better to use the debris field from that mining op we passed. Slingshot through it, scatter their sensors with the junk. Her voice carried that cautious edge, always weighing the odds, but her eyes burned with the same fire as the rest. Elias considered, the weight of command settling like an old friend. The aliens thought humans brittle, their tech superior, seize one world, watch the rest crumble. But they'd underestimated the stubborn spark in crews like theirs. Debris field it is. Marco prepped the evasion pattern. Lena armed the countermeasures. We're not running blind. The ship lurched into motion, weaving toward the asteroid belt's glittering haze. Chunks of rock and twisted metal from abandoned haulers spun lazily, a graveyard of forgotten industry. Alarms blared as the first alien probes locked on, their energy signatures pinging like distant thunder. Elias felt the deck tilt under acceleration, his stomach twisting with the G-forces. Probes inbound, 3 minutes, Lena reported, her station lighting up with red alerts. She deployed decoys, small bursts of chaff that mimicked their heat signature, buying seconds. Marco whooped softly as the Endurance slipped into the debris, the hull scraping against a passing boulder with a screech that set teeth on edge. But the aliens adapted quicker than expected. A squadron broke from the swarm, their sleek vessels slicing through the field like knives through fog. One clipped an asteroid, exploding in a bloom of plasma, but the others pressed on, weapons charging with an ominous whine over the comms. "They're ignoring the junk," Marco cursed, yanking the ship into a barrel roll. A beam grazed their shields, sparks erupting across the viewport. Structural integrity dipped to 52%, warnings flashing for hull breaches in the lower decks. Elias unstrapped, moving to Lena's side. "Give me a firing solution on the lead ship. We're turning this into their graveyard." She nodded, sinking the railgun arrays. But as the targeting locked, another hit rocked them. Life support flickered, air hissing from a microfracture. Marco shouted from helm, "Cap, we're venting atmosphere." "Can't hold course." The stakes sharpened, the cold void pressing in. Elias's mind raced, sifting through the chaos. The debris wasn't just cover, it was ammunition. "Marco, adjust trajectory. Ram us through that cluster ahead, the big hauler wreck." "Lena, overload the forward emitters, make it look like we're exploding." They stared at him, then moved. The Endurance plunged into the wreck's shadow, engines screaming. Alarms wailed as they sideswiped metal. But the ploy worked. The aliens veered closer, sensing vulnerability. Elias triggered the emitters, a brilliant flash of simulated warp failure, blinding their sensors. In that heartbeat, Marco spun the ship, railguns barking. The lead alien vessel shattered under the barrage, debris blooming outward. The squadron faltered, confused signals rippling through their formation. But triumph soured fast. A secondary explosion from the hauler wreck caught their tail, shearing off a stabilizer fin. The Endurance spun wildly, controls fighting back. Lena sealed the breach manually, her suit hissing as she worked, while Marco wrestled the helm. They stabilized, limping free of the field. The alien pursuit scattered but regrouping. Elias sank back into his chair, breath ragged. One skirmish won, but the fleet loomed larger on scans, thousands more closing the net. "Damage report," he said, voice hoarse. "Bad," Lena replied, wiping blood from a cut on her forehead. "But we're still flying." Marco grinned through the strain. "One down, 9,999 to go." The stars wheeled outside, defiant in their silence. Elias gripped the armrests as the Endurance shuddered through another jolt, the makeshift patch on the hull groaning under the strain. Alarms blared in staccato bursts, painting the bridge in red flickers. "Marco, what's our vector? We can't take another hit like that." Marco's fingers danced over the console, sweat beading on his brow, pushing max thrust toward the Oort cloud. "It'll buy us cover, asteroids, debris fields. But the engines are redlining. We push too hard, we blow a core." Lena patched into the comms from the engineering bay, her voice cutting through the din like a knife, already rerouting power. "Give me 2 minutes and I'll squeeze another 10% out of her." "Elias, those bastards are matching our speed. Their signatures, 3 cruisers, flanking us like wolves." Elias nodded to himself, eyes locked on the holographic display where enemy icons pulsed closer. The aliens had hit the colony hard, glassing swaths of Earth analog terra from orbit. But humanity's ragtag fleet had been hitting back, guerrilla strikes, improvised traps. One hauler down, but the cost clawed at him, the dead faces from the wreck, the planet's survivors screaming over open channels before silence. "No time for ghosts now. Options," he said flatly, forcing calm into his tone. "We fight, we run, or we hide. Pick your poison." Marco snorted, yanking a lever to evade an incoming missile lock. Fight suicide. Their shields laugh at our lasers. Run, we're leaking atmo. Won't last the hour. Hiding in the Ort. Risky, but it's our shot. We ghost through the rocks, lose them in the clutter. A proximity alert wailed. Debris from the hauler field whipping past. One chunk glancing the wing with a metallic screech. The ship bucked, lights dimming as secondary systems tripped. Lena cursed over the line. That did it, lost auxiliary thrusters. We're down to mains. Elias, decide now. He stared at the scan, the alien signatures tightening their noose. The Oort cloud loomed on the edge, a hazy swarm of ice and stone. Humanity's forgotten frontier turned potential graveyard. They'd scavenged parts there before, turned junk into weapons. Grit your teeth and improvise, that's what kept them alive. Marco, plot for the densest cluster. Lena, seal what you can and prep the grapples. We're going mining. The Endurance dove, engines howling as they pierced the cloud's outer veil. Ice shards glittered like shattered diamonds against the void, pinging off the hull in a deadly hail. Marco wove through the chaos, the ship groaning with every sharp turn. Got eyes on a big one, comet fragment half a click wide. If we hug it tight? An alien beam lanced out, scorching the shields and filling the bridge with ozone stink. Elias braced as the deck tilted. They're on us! Evasive, now! Marco slammed the controls, the Endurance spinning into a barrel roll that slung them toward the comet's shadow. The pursuing cruisers fired wildly, their shots carving glowing scars through the ice but missing the hull by meters. Lena's voice crackled back. Shields at 30%. I'm venting plasma to mask our signature. Looks like a debris bloom. Buy me time. Elias unstrapped, grabbing a toolkit from the bulkhead. No sitting this out. He dashed to the auxiliary station, patching into the external cams. The comet loomed, a jagged behemoth tumbling slow. Marco, match its spin. We'll slingshot around. Use the gravity to shake them. The maneuver bit hard, G-forces pinning them to seats as the ship whipped around the ice mass. Alien fire grazed the tail, alarms shrieking anew, but the curve hid them, the cloud's density scattering sensors. One cruiser misjudged, slamming into a rogue boulder. Its explosion bloomed silent, fragments peppering the void. Lost one, Marco whooped, voice edged with strain. But the other two are circling back, smarter this time. Lena burst onto the bridge, face smeared with grease, hauling a jury-rigged emitter. Grapples ready. If we latch onto that comet, we can ride it out. Power down to minimal. They'll think we're wrecked debris. Elias took the controls from Marco, his hands steady despite the adrenaline surge. The aliens closed, their hulls gleaming predatory in the starlight. He fired the grapples, lines snaking out, embedding into the ice with a distant thud felt through the deck. The Endurance yanked tight, swinging into the comet's wake like a barnacle on a whale. Power cycled down, lights fading to emergency glow. They drifted, silent hunters in the frost. Scans showed the aliens probing, beams sweeping the field, but the cloud played its tricks. Echoes, false positives. Minutes stretched, tension coiling like a spring. Then a ping, contact lost. The cruisers peeled away, vectors shifting toward some distant signal. Another human ghost fleet, perhaps, drawing fire. Marco exhaled, slumping. We did it. Ghosted 'em. Lena wiped her hands, eyeing the flickering readouts. For now, hull's cracked. We'll need a real dock soon. That planet they took, our people are still fighting down there. Elias watched the stars through the viewport, the comet's ice refracting light into defiant sparks. One skirmish, one breath, but the war ground on, humanity's fire unquenched. Marco gripped the console edge as the shuttle shuddered, ice crystals fracturing against the viewport like brittle gunfire. The comet's tail had masked their approach to Epsilon 4's orbit, but now the planet loomed, a bruised marble scarred by orbital strikes. Red flares dotted its atmosphere, human resistance flares, defiant signals from the ground fighters. Lena's status on the hull patch? His voice cut sharp over the hum of straining engines. She leaned into the engineering panel, fingers dancing across diagnostics. Holding, but barely, that alien beam scorched through. We're venting atmo in the aft bay. One more jolt and we're space debris. Elias peered at the tactical overlay, his cautious eyes narrowing. Scans picking up 3 alien corvettes in low orbit. They're blockading the drop zones. If we punch through, we'll light up like a flare. Marco nodded, jaw set. No time for retreat. The ground teams, families, miners, whoever hadn't evacuated, were pinned in the canyons, hit by those swarm drones. Intel scraps said the aliens were prepping a full planetary purge, glassing sectors to root out holdouts. One shuttle run couldn't retake a world, but it could drop supplies, link comms, buy them a day. Plot a slingshot trajectory, Marco ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat. Use the debris ring for cover. Elias, arm the decoys. Make 'em think we're a meteor swarm. The shuttle banked hard, thrusters firing in staccato bursts. Elias worked the weapons array, his witty edge dulled by focus. Decoys primed. If this works, I'll buy the first round on whatever rock we wash up on. Lena snorted, securing a loose panel with a magnetic clamp. Assuming we don't vaporize, fuel's down to 30%. No margin for error. They skimmed the ring, chunks of shattered moonlit tumbling in lazy arcs. The aliens' corvettes patrolled like predators, sensor sweeps painting the void in false echoes. Marco's hand steadied on the controls, sweat beating despite the chill. One wrong vector and they'd fragment into the black. A proximity alarm blared. Short, piercing. Contact, Elias muttered. One corvette breaking formation. It's locking on. The ship lurched as evasive maneuvers kicked in, G-forces pinning them to seats. Lena braced, calling out, shields at 60. Rerouting power. An energy lance grazed them, the hull groaning like tortured metal. Sparks erupted from a junction box. Acrid smoke curling through the cabin. Marco wrenched the yoke, diving into a denser debris cluster.
Deploy decoys now!
Elias hit the release. Flares burst outward, mimicking engine signatures, drawing the corvette's fire into a harmless light show. The alien ship veered, beams carving through empty space, but the blockade tightened. Two more vessels converging, their prows glowing with charge. We're pinched, Lena said, voice steady but tight. She patched the breach with emergency foam, the stuff expanding in frothy defiance. Can't outrun 'em. Suggestion. Micro-jump to the planet's shadow. Risky with the damage. Marco weighed it, the planet's curve filling the view. Jump drives hated atmospheric interference. A miscalc could shred them on re-entry, but the ground needed them. Do it. Elias, sync the nav. The hum built, a deep vibration rattling teeth. Elias's fingers flew, inputting coordinates. Jump in 3, 2. Reality smeared. Stars streaked into lines, then snapped back. The shuttle emerged in Epsilon 4's umbra, the sun's glare eclipsed by the world's bulk. Alarms wailed, hull integrity failing, systems flickering. We made it, Marco breathed, scanning for pursuit. The corvettes were distant specks, confused by the vanishing act. But triumph soured fast. Below, the canyon networks glowed with alien signatures, drones swarming like angry wasps, zeroing on a human outpost. Comms crackled to life, a desperate voice breaking through. Shuttle inbound? We're overrun, need evac now. Lena's face hardened, the practical engineer yielding to grit. Drop pods prepped. I'll ride one down with the meds. No, Marco snapped, then softened. We go together. All of us. Elias glanced between them, his caution fracturing into resolve. Idiots. But yeah, for the ground pounders. The shuttle plunged, atmosphere igniting in a fiery sheath. Drones detached from the surface, ascending like hornets. Marco evaded the first barrage, plasma bolts stitching the sky. One clipped the wing, shearing off sensors in a shower of debris. Brace! Lena yelled. They hit the canyon rim, the shuttle skidding across regolith in a plume of dust. Engines whined to silence. Outside, gunfire echoed, human rifles cracking against alien hums. Marco kicked the hatch, rifle in hand. The air tasted of ozone and blood. Fighters emerged from cover, ragged but unbowed, faces lit by flare light. You the relief? One called a woman with a bandaged arm. Part of it, Marco replied, slinging his pack. Where's the fight? She pointed into the gorge. Drones pouring in. We hold the line, but ammo's low. Elias covered their flank, picking off a scout drone with a precise shot. Lena distributed stim packs, her hands quick and sure. Fight smart, she told the group. We turn this choke point into a kill box. The battle ignited. Humans funneled aliens into the narrow pass. Improvised charges, cobbled from mining explosives, collapsing sections in roiling blasts. Marco led a push, grenade in one hand, pistol in the other. Grit turning desperation to momentum. A drone wave crested the ridge, lasers carving rock. Elias dove, rolling to return fire. They're adapting. Marco's boot slipped on the shattered rock, sending a cascade of pebbles into the abyss below. The gorge walls echoed with the whine of alien drones, their red sensor eyes piercing the dust-choked air. He caught himself on a jagged outcrop, heart pounding, and fired blindly upward. One drone shattered in a spray of sparks, but the others swarmed closer, their lasers slicing the air like knives. "Flanking us hard!" Elias shouted from his perch, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. He'd repositioned twice already, but the aliens were learning, predicting his angles, forcing him lower. Sweat stung his eyes as he chambered another round, the metallic click lost in the chaos. Lena crouched behind a boulder, her medkit open, bandaging a fresh cut on her thigh from shrapnel. "Marco, we can't hold this ridge. They're pushing through the eastern cleft. Pull back or we're pinched." He glanced over, seeing the truth in her grim nod. The initial plan to collapse the pass had worked too well at first, burying dozens under rubble. But the aliens adapted, deploying smaller scout units to burrow alternative paths. Ammo crates were down to scraps, and the relief team's stim packs were burning through veins like wildfire. Marco's mind raced. Retreat meant losing the high ground, but staying invited annihilation. "Cover me," he growled, slinging his rifle and grabbing a satchel of leftover mining charges. The weight pulled at his shoulders, but he sprinted toward the eastern cleft, weaving through laser fire that scorched the ground inches from his heels. Elias laid down suppressing fire, each shot a thunderclap that bought precious seconds. A drone buzzed low, its beam grazing Marco's pack, igniting a corner in acrid smoke. He dove into the cleft's shadow, the narrow fissure alive with alien hums. Up close, the drones were mechanical horrors, sleek insectoid bodies with probing appendages that tested the rock for weaknesses. Marco wedged a charge into a fault line, fingers trembling as he primed it. But one drone spotted him, its laser arm whirring to life. Lena appeared at the cleft's mouth, her pistol spitting rounds. "Go, I've got it." She fired steadily, forcing the drone to pivot, its attention split. Elias joined from above, a grenade arcing down to explode in a burst of fire and debris. The distraction held, but not without cost. A laser clipped Lena's shoulder, spinning her back with a cry. Marco hit the detonator and scrambled out as the cleft shuddered. Rock groaned, then roared, a wall of stone plummeting to seal the path in a thunderous avalanche. Drones screeched in protest, crushed or trapped. He emerged coughing dust, hauling Lena to her feet. Her face was pale, blood soaking her sleeve, but her eyes burned with that unyielding spark. "Eastern flanks bottled," Elias called, sliding down to join them. His left arm hung limp, grazed by fire, but he grinned through the pain. "That buys us breathing room." "What's next, boss?" Marco scanned the gorge. The main alien wave faltered, their advance stalled by the new barricade. But scouts still dotted the skies, relaying data, and he knew more would come, smarter, heavier. The humans had turned the terrain against them once, but ingenuity only stretched so far without rest. "We fortify the center. Rig the remaining charges as traps. And Elias, scout for their command unit. If we take that out, the drones go blind." They moved as one, Lena popping a stim despite the risk, her hands steady as she wired a trip line. The air hummed with tension, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the battlefield. For the first time since the drop, Marco felt the tide shift, not victory but survival on their terms. The aliens had numbers, but humans had the will to improvise until the last breath. Elias slipped through the underbrush, his breath ragged but controlled, the alien command unit's signal pulsing like a distant heartbeat in his scanner's readout. The device was a jury-rigged mess, Lena's handiwork from scavenged drone parts, but it worked. Pinpointing the enemy's nerve center 2 clicks east, nestled in a ravine where their larger dropships had carved out a landing zone. He crouched low, mud caking his boots, and keyed his comm. "Marco, it's broadcasting from a central hub. Looks like a floating orb thing, surrounded by those spider mechs, 20, maybe 30 guards. No clear approach without tripping their sensors." Back at the barricade, Marco wiped sweat from his brow, the sun now a blood-orange smear on the horizon. The traps were set, charges wired to seismic triggers hidden in the debris of their last stand. Lena knelt nearby, her fingers black with grease as she calibrated the final detonator. "We can't storm it," she said, voice steady despite the stim crash edging into her eyes. "They'll shred us before we get close. Elias, any weak points? Fence power lines?" "Negative," Elias whispered over the line, edging closer to the ravine's lip. The air hummed with alien tech, a low throb that set his teeth on edge. Below, the command unit hovered, a metallic sphere etched with glowing runes, tendrils of energy linking it to the spider mechs patrolling in tight formation. One mech paused, its sensors swiveling toward him. Elias froze, heart pounding as it scanned the tree line, then dismissed the shadow and resumed its circuit. But their drones are slaved to it. If we EMP the hub, everything goes dark. Blind. Marco nodded to himself, scanning the map projected on his wrist pad. The plan had been bold from the start, but now it teetered on desperation. Their squad was down to 4. Him, Lena, Elias, and Quiet Javier, who manned the Overwatch rifle from a ridge above. Resources were scraps. Ammo low, meds gone, the barricade holding only because the aliens probed cautiously after the ambush. Javier, you hearing this? Cover fire on my mark. Elias, fall back to the fallback point. Lena and I will draw them out. Feint from the south, make them think we're pushing the center. Javier's voice crackled in, terse as ever. Copy, got eyes on the ravine. Winds shifting, your approach will echo. They moved like ghosts in the fading light. Marco and Lena crept south, skirting the barricade's edge where twisted metal from downed ships formed natural cover. Lena planted a decoy charge, a crude beeper to mimic troop movement, and triggered it. The hum intensified immediately. Drones lifting from the horizon, spider mechs detaching from the command unit to investigate. Incoming, Marco hissed, pulling her behind a shattered hull. The ground trembled as the first wave crested the ridge, lasers slicing the dusk. The feint exploded into chaos. Marco fired controlled bursts, drawing the mechs into the trap zone. One spider lunged, its legs scything air, but Lena's tripline snapped taut, charges blooming in a chain of fire that hurled it skyward, limbs flailing. Shrapnel rained, pinging off armor, but more poured in, their return fire scorching the earth. Marco dove, rolling as a beam grazed his shoulder, heat searing through fabric. Lena, fall back! Elias now. Elias triggered the launcher, the EMP arcing toward the ravine like a silent comet. It struck true, blooming in a pulse of blue-white that washed over the command unit. For a heartbeat, silence. Then screams of static as drones plummeted, mechs locking in place, the hub's runes flickering out. The aliens' advance stuttered, their coordination shattered. But the cost hit hard. Javier's rifle barked from above, picking off stragglers, yet a rogue drone, untethered, berserk, slammed into the ridge. Elias saw the flash, heard Javier's grunt cut short. Man down, he reported, voice breaking as he scrambled to check. Javier lay still, chest caved, the rifle smoldering beside him. Marco reached the fallback, Lena limping behind, a gash on her leg from shrapnel. They secured the site, the night now alive with distant alien howls, regrouping, adapting. Elias met Marco's eyes, the weight of loss settling like dust. We bought time. But they're not done. Marco gripped his shoulder, the makeshift bandage on his own wound already soaking through. Neither are we. The ridge trembled under the first probing lights of dawn, alien silhouettes etching against the horizon like jagged teeth. Elias crouched low, his fingers tracing the crude map scratched into the dirt, fallback routes marked with hasty X's, the last drone signatures fading into the valleys below. Marco's breath rasped beside him, the bandage on his shoulder dark and sticky, but his eyes burned with that unyielding focus. Lena sat a few paces back, leg propped on a rock, twisting wire from a salvaged comms unit into something sharper, her jaw set against the pain. They're coming, Marco said, voice low, scanning the tree line where the howls had twisted into a mechanical whine. Scouts first, then the swarm. We hold here or we die running. Elias nodded, the weight of Javier's rifle slung across his back, a ghost of pressure. No time for grief. The aliens had adapted overnight, their signals fracturing into decentralized packs, but that meant chaos they could exploit. Lena's rig, it's ready. She didn't look up, fingers flying. Rig's a booster trap. It'll amplify our jammer, turn their own echoes against them, but it needs line of sight on that central spire. One shot to overload their net. The whine grew to a roar. Shadows detached from the mist. 3 scouts, chitinous forms skittering on multi-jointed legs, sensors whirring as they flanked the ridge. Elias shouldered the rifle, the stock worn smooth from Javier's grip. He fired first, a crack splitting the air, shattering the lead scout's dome. Shards rained down, but the others surged, plasma vents glowing hot. Flank left! Marco barked, rolling to cover and unleashing a burst from his pistol. Bolts scorched the earth, forcing one scout to veer, but the third leaped, claws raking furrows in the rock as it closed on Lena. She didn't flinch. With a grunt, she hurled the wired bundle, a makeshift grenade fused from battery cells and alien debris. It arced true, lodging in the scout's underbelly. Sparks flew, then a bloom of fire as the circuits cross-wired. the creature convulsing in a spray of acrid smoke. Elias picked off the second with a headshot, the body crumpling mid-stride. Silence fell, broken only by the distant thunder of the main force. Marco hauled Lena up, her weight leaning into him. That buys us the spire. Move. They descended the back slope, a treacherous scramble over loose shale, the sun cresting to paint their path in stark relief. Elias led, rifle sweeping, every shadow a threat. The aliens' howls modulated now, a cacophony of distress signals. Lena's earlier pulse had sown doubt in their ranks, but not enough. Halfway down, the ground bucked, a seismic charge rippling from below. Fissures snaked outward, swallowing footing. Marco slipped first, leg vanishing into a crack. Elias lunged, grabbing his arm, muscles straining as the earth groaned wider. Pull! Lena braced against a boulder, tossing her belt to loop around Marco's waist. They hauled together, veins bulging, the rift yawning like a maw. Marco's boot caught an outcrop, and with a final heave he was up, gasping, the three of them collapsing in a heap. Damn seismic tech, Elias muttered, wiping sweat. But in the chaos he'd glimpsed it, their edge. The charge had exposed a vein of conductive ore, raw and gleaming. Lena's eyes lit. That's our conduit. Rig it to the booster. We channel the overload straight into their core signals. No time for doubt. They worked fast, splicing wires into the ore, sweat stinging eyes as the swarm crested the ridge above. Drones buzzed now, a black cloud descending, lasers stitching the air. Elias fired upward, buying seconds, while Marco and Lena fused the trap. The device hummed to life, a low thrum vibrating through the ground. Now, Lena yelled. She triggered it. Energy surged, the ore lighting like a fuse, racing toward the spire. The aliens faltered midair, their formation splintering as feedback loops tore through their net. Drones plummeted, crashing in fiery wrecks. Scouts seized, limbs locking in digital agony. The swarm broke, scattering into the valleys, their unified assault fracturing into panicked retreat. Elias lowered the rifle, chest heaving, watching the horizon empty. Marco clapped his shoulder, grim smile cracking through the blood. One planet down. They'll think twice about the next. Lena tied off her leg wound, standing tall despite the limp. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the wreckage. Their victory hard won, the ridge scarred forever. But humanity's fire burned on.